The chamber was built to make visitors feel small. Its ceiling arched so high that the lights looked like distant stars. Long banners of different species hung from the walls. The air smelled faintly metallic, and the low hum of translation devices filled the silence. In the center of it all stood one human. Ambassador Daniel Hayes did not look powerful. He was not tall compared to the towering delegates seated above him. He wore a simple dark suit with a small silver emblem of Earth on his chest. His hands were folded calmly behind his back. Across the curved chamber, dozens of alien representatives watched him. The Federation Council had called this emergency session for one reason: human technology. Just 3 months ago, Earth had revealed a new energy and propulsion system. It was clean. It was stable. It allowed ships to travel vast distances in a fraction of a normal time. It did not require rare minerals or dangerous fuel. It worked on principles the Federation did not fully understand. That frightened them. A tall, pale blue delegate from the core systems leaned forward. His voice echoed through the chamber. Ambassador Hayes. The translation field carried his words smoothly. The Federation recognizes humanity's recent technological advancement. Daniel nodded once. The delegate continued. However, such development must be regulated. Your species is newly admitted. Rapid advancement creates instability. Murmurs of agreement spread through the chamber. Another delegate, this one with dark, scaled skin and glowing eyes, spoke next. We request immediate transfer of all research data related to your propulsion core, for review, for safety, for shared security. The words sounded calm, reasonable, but everyone in the room understood what they meant. Surrender it. Daniel did not move. The blue delegate folded his long fingers together. You must understand, this is standard procedure. No emerging civilization is permitted to independently maintain technology that can alter galactic balance. A few delegates nodded again. Humanity was still considered young, politically inexperienced, economically small compared to the core systems, weak. The chamber lights reflected off Daniel's glasses. His expression did not change. Earth respects the Federation, he said quietly. The silence grew deeper. He did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He simply waited. The scaled delegate tilted his head. Then you will comply. It was not a question. Several screens activated around the chamber. Charts appeared. Graphs. Projections. Models predicting instability if humanity retained control. The Federation had prepared carefully. One council member added, "Your system allows independent energy production on a planetary scale. That removes supply dependence. It shifts economic power." Another said, "It removes strategic reliance." Another, "It removes leverage." The word hung in the air. Leverage. Daniel understood then. It was never about safety. It was about control. The blue delegate leaned closer. Ambassador Hayes, the Federation has maintained peace for 12,000 cycles. That peace depends on structure, oversight, balance, and obedience, someone muttered softly from the back rows. Daniel heard it. So did others. The chamber grew tense. He looked up slowly, meeting the eyes of one delegate after another. Some stared back with cold authority. Others avoided his gaze. There were species in this room who had once been in humanity's place. They had complied. Now they sat quietly. Earth was invited into this federation, Daniel said calmly. We were told it was a union of equals. It is, the blue delegate replied smoothly. Then why, Daniel asked, are only certain species allowed to decide which discoveries are acceptable? A ripple passed through the chamber. The scaled delegate's eyes narrowed. You misunderstand the situation. I don't think we do, Daniel answered. Another delegate rose halfway from his seat. Ambassador, refusal will be seen as non-cooperation. Trade routes can be reviewed. Access privileges adjusted. There it was. Pressure. Soft. Polite. But clear. Daniel felt every eye on him. The Federation assumed Earth would bend. That humanity valued membership more than independence. They believed humans were too new. Too unsure. Too small to stand alone. Daniel had been chosen for this meeting. because he did not react easily, because he listened more than he spoke. He looked at the massive chamber again, at the symbols of power, at the faces that expected surrender. He thought of Earth cities powered by clean light, of ships crossing space without debt to Federation energy chains, of small colonies that no longer feared shortages. Humanity had built this system to survive, not to threaten, but not to kneel either. The blue delegate's voice cut through the silence. Ambassador Hayes, the council awaits your confirmation. The chamber became completely still. Even the hum machine seemed softer. Daniel adjusted his glasses slightly. He did not show anger. He did not show fear. He simply spoke. Humanity will not be surrendering anything. For one heartbeat, no one reacted. Then the chamber erupted. Voices rose in shock. Translation fields flickered under the sudden noise. Several delegates stood at once. Others whispered urgently to advisors. The scaled delegate's eyes widened in disbelief. You refuse a lawful directive? Daniel remained where he stood. We decline the demand, he said evenly. Our technology was built by human minds, on human worlds, with human resources. It poses no threat. It will not be transferred under pressure. The blue delegate's voice lost its smooth tone. You risk isolation. Daniel met his gaze without hesitation. Then we will innovate alone. The words landed harder than any threat. Silence slowly returned, but it was no longer calm. It was unsettled. The Federation Council had expected fear, negotiation, delay. They had not expected certainty. As the delegates argued among themselves, Daniel stood quietly in the center of the chamber, small, alone, unmoved, and for the first time since humanity had joined the Federation, the Council understood something uncomfortable. The youngest species in the room was not asking for permission anymore. The headlines spread across the Federation networks within hours. Humanity rejects oversight. New species endangers galactic stability. Reckless technology hoarded by Earth. Across thousands of systems, the message was the same. Humans were selfish. Humans were impatient. Humans did not understand responsibility. On Earth, Daniel Hayes watched the broadcast in silence. He stood in a quiet conference room overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Ships moved slowly in orbit above. Cargo lanes blinked on a holographic display in front of him. And one by one, those lanes were dimming. Trade ships from core Federation systems began reporting delays. Docking permissions were suddenly under review. Inspections became longer. Fees increased without clear explanation. It was subtle, but it was pressure. Within days, Earth's outer colonies noticed supply shipments arriving late. Nothing critical yet. Nothing openly hostile. Just inconvenient. Just enough to remind humanity, who controlled the larger network. Several ambassadors from neutral species requested private meetings. A tall avian diplomat spoke gently across a secure channel. You should reconsider. The Council does not like to be challenged publicly. Another delegate from a mineral-rich world whispered, compliance would be easier. They only want access, not control. Daniel listened to them all. He thanked them politely. He made no promises. Behind the scenes, the Federation Council met in closed sessions. Sanctions were discussed. Restrictions proposed. Access privileges reviewed. The official statement released to the public was careful. A temporary policy review of emerging technologies for collective safety. But everyone understood the meaning. Conform, or be isolated. On Earth, markets trembled for 2 days. Then they stabilized, because something unusual was happening. Human cargo ships began rerouting. New corridors appeared on navigation charts. Independent stations that had once relied on Federation relays suddenly announced upgraded communication arrays, built by human engineers. A logistics analyst in the Federation Corps noticed something strange. Earth's infrastructure growth rate has increased, she reported. How? Her superior asked. They are under review. That's the point, she replied. They're expanding. Quietly, in shipyards near Mars, new hulls were assembled at record speed, but they were not warships. They were transport vessels, energy carriers, construction platforms. In orbit around Jupiter, massive orbital rings began linking into a network that did not require Federation relay systems. On the lunar surface, research centers ran around the clock. No military mobilization, no fleet deployments, no defensive buildup, just construction, just development. A Federation intelligence officer stared at a rotating hologram of Earth's growing infrastructure web. "They are building redundancy," he muttered. "Preparing for conflict?" someone asked. He shook his head slowly. "No, preparing for independence." Trade slowdowns that were meant to weaken Earth instead push human industries to move faster. Companies that once relied on imported components shifted to local production. Energy exports that had flowed outward were redirected inward. And across social networks inside Federation space, something unexpected began happening. Small systems struggling with unstable power grids began sharing rumors. Human energy cores require no rare crystals. Human drives don't degrade after extended use. They offer to sell units without long-term contracts. The Council dismissed the rumors as exaggeration, but private messages between outer systems told a different story. They refused the Council. One message read, "And they're still standing." Back on Earth, Daniel met with the Prime Assembly. "The pressure will increase," one official warned. "It already has," Daniel replied calmly. An advisor looked up from a data tablet. "Outer systems are requesting technical discussions." Quietly, Daniel nodded. "We expected that." He walked toward the wide window. Sunlight reflected off orbital platforms in the distance. "They think we're mobilizing," the advisor said. Daniel allowed himself a small smile. "We are. For war. For growth." Days passed. Federation commentators continued framing humanity as unstable. Some species reduced diplomatic engagement. A few openly criticized Earth's refusal to cooperate. But something subtle shifted. Earth did not protest publicly. Earth did not argue. Earth did not retaliate. It simply built. New shipyards opened. Energy grids linked continents seamlessly. Human colonies that once depended on Federation supply chains began reporting full autonomy. A closed-door session of the Federation Council grew heated. "They are ignoring the pressure," one delegate said sharply. "Then increase it," another responded. "We cannot escalate without justification," the blue delegate warned. "Not openly." A smaller species representative spoke up quietly. "What if their system truly destabilizes our structure?" The chamber fell silent. That question had not been asked before. 7 days after the trade slowdowns began, Daniel Hayes stood before a cluster of Federation journalists in Earth orbit. His posture was relaxed. His tone was steady. "Humanity understands the concerns raised by the Federation," he said. Reporters leaned forward. "But misunderstandings arise from distance." A pause. "In 7 days," Daniel continued, "Earth will host a public demonstration of our propulsion and energy systems. Open access, open observation. No weapons, no secrecy." The room stirred. "We invite all Federation members to witness what we have built." A reporter raised a hand. "Is this a military display?" Daniel shook his head. "It is a statement." "And what statement is that?" Another asked. Daniel's eyes reflected the blue curve of Earth behind him. That humanity does not need to threaten the galaxy to stand within it. The broadcast spread across Federation space within minutes. Council members watched in tense silence. Outer systems watched with quiet hope. And for the first time since the demand had been refused, the Federation realized something uncomfortable. Humanity was not reacting to pressure. It was preparing to redefine the game. Federation observer ships gathered in silent formation above Earth. They came prepared for tension. Long-range scanners were active. Defense analysts stood ready. Council representatives watched through secure feeds from distant systems. Many expected a display of power, a warning, a show of force. Earth's orbit, however, looked calm. Blue oceans turned slowly below. Civilian traffic moved in smooth lines. No battle fleets. No weapons platforms rotating into position. Just structure. Just light. Ambassador Daniel Hayes stood inside an orbital observation platform. Behind him, a transparent wall revealed a curve of Earth and a growing network of stations stretching outward like silver threads. "Begin transmission," he said quietly. Across Federation space, the broadcast began. A simple message appeared first. Humanity demonstration. Open access. Then the camera shifted. In deep orbit, several large cargo vessels activated at once. No weapons ports opened. No shields flared. Instead, bright rings of white energy formed around them. A Federation engineer leaned closer to his console. "Propulsion core activation," he whispered. The ships did not accelerate in a traditional way. They folded space around them gently, almost invisibly, and vanished. Gasps echoed inside multiple observer ships. Seconds later, the same vessels appeared near Jupiter's orbit. No time lag. No energy spike dangerous enough to destabilize space lanes. Instant relocation. Daniel's voice remained calm over the broadcast. The Human Logistics Network allows near-instant transport of materials between stable nodes. The camera shifted again. On the dark side of Mars, a mining colony activated its power grid. For years, it had depended on imported Federation energy crystals. Now a soft wave of light spread across the surface as a human-built reactor core engaged. No pollution, no radiation spikes. Clean output readings appeared on screen. A Federation analyst checked his data twice. That output level, it could stabilize an unstable star-side grid. Daniel continued, "Our energy systems are scalable, planetary or orbital, designed for sustainability." The next display caused even more silence. Above a barren moon in the outer solar system, thousands of small objects deployed from a carrier platform. They were tiny, no larger than transport pods. "Microconstructors," Daniel explained. The machines descended to the moon's surface and began working. Within minutes, sensor readings showed atmospheric density increasing. Ice deposits were processed into vapor. Structural frameworks rose from the ground like silver vines. Terraforming, but not over centuries. Observers watched as the once lifeless rock began showing controlled environmental stabilization. Not a finished world, but a beginning. Inside the Federation Council chamber, no one spoke. They had expected warships. They had expected hidden weapons. Instead, they were watching independence. Daniel stood with hands folded behind his back. "We did not build this to conquer," he said clearly. The camera focused on him now. "We built it so we would never have to kneel." The words were not loud, but they carried. In outer Federation systems, smaller worlds watched the feed with intense focus. Planets that had struggled under heavy energy contracts. Colonies that paid high transport fees to move basic supplies. They saw something different. Choice. Back in orbit, a Federation delegate opened a secure channel to Earth. "Are these technologies available for trade?" he asked carefully. Daniel did not hesitate. "Yes, through partnership agreements. Voluntary cooperation. No forced oversight. Under Federation review?" No. The channel went silent. Within hours, encrypted requests began reaching Earth's diplomatic network. A desert world near the rim asked about energy stabilization units. A mining colony suffering from supply delays requested logistics node access. A small agricultural planet in unstable orbit quietly submitted a proposal for terraforming assistance. Not publicly. Not yet. But they were asking. The Federation Council entered emergency discussion. "They are bypassing our supply systems," one delegate said sharply. "They are offering independence," another corrected. "That undermines structure. It empowers members." Across the galaxy, trade algorithms began shifting. If human transport reduced time from weeks to seconds, supply chains would change. If human energy removed dependence on rare resources, leverage would disappear. It was not an attack. It was transformation. And transformation could not be sanctioned easily. Daniel received a report on his console. Request queue, 312 planetary inquiries. He read quietly. He did not smile. This was not victory. This was balance. The blue delegate from the council sent a formal message. "You risk fracturing the Federation." Daniel responded calmly, "Or strengthening it." Days passed. Outer systems grew bolder. Some openly praised Earth's demonstration. Others remained cautious, but curious. Then the numbers changed. A classified report reached the Federation core. Half of the outer member systems had formally requested infrastructure support from Earth. Half. The council chamber, once confident and controlled, now felt uncertain. They had tried pressure. Humanity had answered with possibility. And now the galaxy was watching which future would spread faster. The collapse did not begin with explosions. It began with numbers. In the financial centers of the Federation core worlds, economic models started showing small errors. Energy futures dropped by 3%, then 5%, then 12%. Transport contracts that had once been locked for decades were quietly canceled. Analysts thought it was a glitch. It was not. Across the outer systems, human energy cores came online one by one. Planets that had struggled under high-cost supply agreements suddenly reported stable output at a fraction of the price. No shortages, no rolling blackouts, no dependency fees. Energy markets across the Federation adjusted in response, and they kept adjusting. A senior economic advisor stared at a holographic projection of galactic trade flows. The thick lines that once ran from core worlds to distant colonies were thinning. Why are exports decreasing? He demanded. A junior analyst answered carefully. Because they no longer need them. Human logistics nodes were now active in dozens of systems. Cargo that once took weeks now arrived in moments. Middle routes were bypassed. Toll stations stood unused. It was not sabotage. It was replacement. On a small agricultural planet near the rim, farmers watched as their first human reactor stabilized seasonal storms that had damaged crops for generations. For the first time, they planned harvest without fear. On a mining colony that had paid heavy Federation transport tariffs, materials were now shipped instantly through human corridors. Costs dropped. Profits rose. But more importantly, control shifted. Back in the Federation Council chamber, tension replaced confidence. They are dismantling our structure, one counselor said sharply. They're offering alternatives, another replied. The difference mattered. Reports continued arriving. Outer systems once dependent on core world energy crystals had ended contracts. Smaller species began forming independent trade clusters around human logistics hubs. The Federation's power had never relied on weapons alone. It relied on reliance, and that reliance was fading. Ambassador Daniel Hayes stood on Earth's orbital platform, watching data streams scroll across his display. He saw no military movements, no defensive alerts, just partnerships. A message arrived from a small water world that had long struggled under heavy supply quotas. Thank you, it read simply. Daniel read it twice. In the Federation core, emergency economic simulations were run repeatedly. Each time, the outcome was the same. If the current trend continued, the Council's leverage over outer systems would decrease by nearly 40% within 2 cycles. 40%, the blue delegate repeated slowly. And rising, the analyst confirmed. Some counselors reacted with anger. This is strategic expansion. They planned this from the beginning. They must be contained before full independence spreads. Others were quieter. They did not threaten us. They did not deploy fleets. They did not fire a single shot. The chamber fell into uneasy silence. It was true. There had been no warships in orbit, no blockades, no sanctions from Earth. Only choice. Smaller species had chosen cheaper energy, faster logistics, freedom from long-term contracts. And the Federation could not openly forbid its members from choosing improvement. One counselor stood and spoke firmly. If we allow this to continue, we become irrelevant. Another replied, or we evolve. The word hung in the air. Evolve. The Federation had governed for thousands of cycles through centralized control. Now a younger species was spreading influence without force. It was not domination. It was demonstration. Markets stabilized again, but around human standards. Energy indexes recalibrated to match human output efficiency. Transport metrics adjusted to human transit speeds. The galaxy was not collapsing. It was reorganizing. Daniel received another report. Half of the Federation's outer systems had formally integrated human infrastructure support. The number was growing daily. Earth's response remained calm. No triumph speeches, no declarations, just continued expansion. In the council chamber, debate turned heated. If we classify them as a destabilizing force, we can justify restriction, one delegate argued. And enforce it how? Another asked. They have violated no law. They refused a directive that had no binding authority. Voices overlapped. Translation fields flickered. For the first time in centuries, the Federation did not control the pace of change. It was reacting. Finally, the blue delegate raised his hand, demanding silence. This cannot continue without structural adjustment, he said carefully. All eyes turned toward him. He looked at the updated economic projections. Once more, energy independence spreading, supply chains decentralizing, autonomy rising. Not chaos. Freedom. He exhaled slowly. Call an emergency full council session, he ordered. A murmur spread through the chamber. For what purpose? Someone asked. The blue delegate's voice was steady now, though not as confident as before. To review humanity's classification within the Federation. Silence followed. Humanity had been labeled emerging civilization. Young, developing, manageable. That label no longer fit. Across the galaxy, outer systems watched quietly, waiting to see how the Federation would respond. And in the core chamber, a realization settled over the delegates. Power had shifted, not through conquest, not through destruction, but through something far harder to control. Choice. The emergency session was scheduled for the next cycle. On its agenda was a single item, reclassification of humanity. The chamber was quiet when the vote concluded. No shouting, no threats, no dramatic gestures. Just a line of text appearing across every official display in the Federation. Doctrine Amendment approved. For the first time in centuries, the Federation had changed one of its core principles. Humanity was no longer classified as an emerging civilization. The new designation appeared clearly beneath Earth's emblem, strategic tier species. The words carried weight, not because they signaled dominance, but because they acknowledged permanence. The blue delegate stood slowly. His voice, once confident with control, now carried something different. Acceptance. The Federation recognizes the technological sovereignty of all member worlds, he read aloud. Innovation shall remain the property of its creators. The chamber listened carefully. Technology ownership is to be respected. Sovereign development is to be protected. No forced acquisition mandate shall be enacted under Federation authority. Silence followed the final line. It was more than policy. It was surrender of leverage. Across outer systems, the news spread quickly. Worlds that had once felt small within the vast structure of the Federation now felt seen. Human infrastructure hubs continued operating without interruption. Energy grids glowed steadily. Logistics corridors pulsed with movement. Nothing exploded. Nothing collapsed. The galaxy simply adjusted. In private channels, former critics contacted Earth. A scaled delegate who once argued for sanctions requested a trade summit. An avian representative who had warned Daniel to reconsider now asked about energy grid integration. A mineral-rich world proposed a joint research facility. They did not speak of past tension. They spoke of partnership. On Earth, Daniel Hayes stood once again in orbit, this time facing the planet below through a wide observation window. City lights shimmered across continents. Orbital stations formed a quiet crown around the world. He was no longer alone in Federation meetings. He was no longer viewed as inexperienced. But he did not look different. No medals, no celebration, just quiet work continuing. A journalist from a neutral system approached him for a final interview. Ambassador Hayes, she began. Many believe humanity forced the Federation to change. Did you win? Daniel watched the cargo vessel fold space and vanish toward a distant colony. He considered the question. Behind him, Earth rotated peacefully. We didn't win, he said calmly. The journalist blinked. You didn't. Daniel shook his head slightly. We simply refused to be owned. The words were not sharp. They were steady. Across the Federation, the amendment triggered further revisions. Smaller councils within member systems began drafting their own sovereignty protections. For thousands of cycles, power had flowed in one direction, from the center outward. Now it flowed in many directions. The Federation did not weaken. It matured. Outer systems gained autonomy without leaving the Union. Core worlds adapted their economic models to compete fairly rather than depend on enforced reliance. And humanity continued building. New research stations launched quietly. Terraforming projects expanded responsibly. Human engineers trained mixed-species teams without demanding loyalty in return. Influence grew, not because it was taken, because it was chosen. The blue delegate watched Earth's orbital skyline from a secure feed. He remembered the first session, when he expected compliance. He understood now what he had misjudged. Humanity did not fear isolation. It feared dependence. And once that fear was removed, everything changed. The journalist concluded her interview. "Do you believe this will prevent future conflicts?" she asked. Daniel gave a small, thoughtful smile. "Conflicts happen when people believe they have no options," he replied. "We gave them options." In the distance, a newly stabilized world glowed faintly through a long-range feed, its storms quieted by human reactors. In another sector, a trade route that once required weeks now took seconds. Across the galaxy, systems adjusted to a new balance, not enforced, accepted. Daniel turned from the window and prepared for his next meeting. There were still negotiations to handle, still partnerships to build. The story was not about victory. It was about direction, and the direction had changed. As Earth's orbital lights shimmered against the darkness of space, one truth settled quietly over the Federation. The galaxy had expected weapons. Humanity offered independence. Power wasn't taken. It was built. They demanded control. Humanity gave them a new future instead.